Hello, everyone. This is Korak for the American Reach Mahjong League. I am joined by Nathaniel.
Hello.
So today we, of course, have the wrap up of the summer season as it just finished a few days ago, and we are going into the new fall season. So a whole bunch of action came up over the course of the last 3 months. We'll be going over that and then seeing how the divisions ended up shaking up. And any initial thoughts, Nathaniel?
I've been really looking forward to this recap. I know you and Tucker usually do this. It's the first time that I get to commentate, but there are a lot of interesting things happened this past season, and I cannot wait to get into it.
Well, there are a ton of divisions. We had five, and now in the new season, the new B3 will have a full 36. But we'll start off with last season. You see here the B3 stats. The B3 didn't quite reach the level required to create a new Betas League season, but it was big. I believe there were 34 people in it at one point, and you can see just a monstrous fight there or everyone just scrambling for those promotion slots. And you'll see on the left, the sort of tan up arrows are guaranteed promotions. The white up arrows are ones that were opened because someone in the target division either took a hiatus or just said, you know what, the league is a little too much for my schedule. But you look at B3 here, and just at the very top, you'd have exactly what you expect. People playing solid Mahjong, really pulling away from the pack, and you see these big different win and deal in percentage, fairly low deal in average, EV really high positive. We haven't really talked about the stats before, but to go over a quick summary here, your score is just your raw score. Your this season, this is actually the standard 10-ho format. It's number of firsts plus number of seconds plus number of thirds plus number of fourths, and your total overall score, your winning percentage, how much your average wins are, your deal in percentage, how much those average deal ins are. EV, which is kind of an internal stat we've been using, kind of a rule of thumb. It's calculated by multiplying your win times the average win and subtracting the deal in times the average deal in. So generally, if you're winning big hands and not feeding in, and when you do to low cheap hands, then your EV will go up. And on the other end, if you're dealing into a bunch of really bad hands, that EV will get even potentially into the negatives. Of course, your call and reach rate's kind of standard, and we combine those also into something called the participation rate, which kind of describes a play style. That you're going to have some people who just stay closed, very disciplined, just sit back, wait for the action to happen. If I get the reachy, great. If I don't, that's fine. And you're going to have other people who are just calling, going, trying to get involved in any hand, especially the people here over 40%. I think I was over 40% this season, definitely took a more aggressive line. And those just kind of summarize how things are. So, any other thoughts you have, Nathaniel, look at these stats?
Yeah, speaking about the participation, I generally tend to look at that when I'm playing against opponents who I haven't seen before, just because I want to get a sense of, are they going to be aggressively calling? Are they going to be sitting back and declaring reaches for big value hands? I really like looking at that measure, as well as the EV. That's more of just a general sense of how their season's been going, I feel. So I don't look too much at that either. But yeah, B3 was such a monstrous group that even there were promotions out of this division that aren't showing here. I believe all the way down to the 21th slot ended up promoting due to players going on hiatus. So definitely, even if it doesn't look like you are in promotion range just yet, keep fighting for as much value as you can. You never know what will happen at the end of the season, and if your slot, if the promotion slots may get extended down to your name. So
I think we have a couple B3 clips. Let's take a look at those. Oh, well, that fixed your problem. That is Ricci Dora Goodway waiting on the 4-7 mon. There are 4 out, so 3 in the wall. There are 4 out, so 4 on the wall. I can math. Oh, Khan! Sumo Rinshan! Wow! Ricci Rinshan, Sumo, Doratu, and Uratu. And so there you see a nice little Rinshan to really pull away and make a nice little 50,000 point win into a 60 or pushing a lot more points. And really, when you're talking about a plus minus league, it's really important to get these types of wins to be able to show the dominance because a couple of big wins will average out against a low one. And of course, anytime you get a Rinchon, especially when you get some Urador along with it to boost a nice little hand there. They're just going in as you look at that hand, it's what? Ricci Dora? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. It's just Ricci. Yeah, Ricci Dora. And then the con turns that into 12,000. There's such a huge difference there.
The con adding an extra Dora and an extra Uda plus the Rinshan. So absolutely reaching from a position of power, conning from a position of power, and getting rewarded.
And one of the things that's always forgotten about on cons, especially terminal cons, is even if you miss like everything, Ricci Sumo Dora with the terminal on con is already a Mongon right there. The 3 Han 60 Fu is good enough. And that's something I think a lot of players often forget, but it can be very useful.
The Fu bonus, super powerful. Easy to miss, though. I wonder if we have the B3 division for the upcoming season. And you can see it's just as big as, even bigger, I think, than the last one.
Yeah, it's bigger. We hit the completed cap of 36 players. That if there were even one more, we probably would have had to split this up into 2 divisions, have a beta league, similar to what happened in the summer.
And this is, of course,
yeah,
due to the number of new entrants. I believe we had something like 22 new, or 26 even, new players entering the field this season. So really excited to see some of these games from B3. I know a lot of the new players are quite experienced in Mahjong, so new to ARML, but certainly not new to Mahjong.
Yeah, and that's one of the big advantages of ARML is a lot of us, especially that have been largely exclusively online, have just not been able to see all the players that are out there. I guarantee you, I didn't even know there were 100 players that were just consistently going out on an online grind or a physical grind. And it's great to see as many people get together here and show where they stack.
Absolutely. And for the new players as well, the players who are new to Mahjong, of course, very happy to see you here in the ARML and excited to watch the promotion climb. Of course, if you are interested, there's always broadcasts throughout the season that you can watch and learn from the other players. You can play game reviews. You can post what would you do's in the Discord. Lots of ways to improve your game. Excited to watch the growth.
And talk about broadcasting, we've done a lot. Even you would say, oh, you just spend all your time in A1 and A2. No, we hit all the way down. I think we broadcast everyone in ARML by the end of the season except one person who scheduled their games a little earlier than we get volunteers for.
Yeah, that's our goal every season. Make sure everyone gets broadcast at least once. I'm glad we've been able to hit that nearly every season.
All right, well, let's take a look at B2. So you're going to see a few familiar names here because B2 had a combination of people that in the inaugural beta league managed to get in B1, a couple fell down, a whole bunch of people they're in B2 leagues, whether you're in B2A, B2B, or B2C in the previous season. But coming in here to summer, you see a bunch of names again that you'd really expect. And of course, everyone here is a little biased, hoping that the organizer of ARML could pull it out and did end up with a plus 10.7. That is Edwin, who managed to promote. But the story of this division was very clearly Matthias and Anya just rolling. When you have scores that are over 100 of third place and you're guaranteed 9 promotions, you're not in any danger.
Absolutely, the two of them dominating. And look at the EV for Matthias here. 910 is well above the other players in the division. 180 above Patrick, who managed a 730 EV in fourth place. But yeah, 910 is extremely high for not just this division, but the league in general.
And turns out there were a lot of people that ended up taking a hiatus in B2 this upcoming season. So I don't think we actually had any demotions out of this division. There was a whole bunch of turnover, people saying, okay, we did one season, need to take a break, get ready for Christmas, all that fun stuff, and just decided to take the season off. And that's perfectly okay in ARML. You're not immediately committed for like the next few years. You come in, you play season. If you don't like it, you just move on, or you can take a season off. We know real life gets in the way, and real life should take priority. But on the other end, of course, you see a few here at the bottom, and especially look at Blaine, who, of course, has done commentary for us, and he's winning those average hands, but just dealing in so much that you're going to have problems at that point. But overall, I mean, solid play. You look at the overall stats, and EVs above average, fairly aggressive. You have a full 2% higher call rate. Just action filled. If you're looking for action, especially last season, B2 had a bunch of it.
Yeah, I feel like B2 was the division that had the most aggressive players out of all of them. Definitely some of the players at the top are very willing to push their hands to completion, and it shows in the participation rate. Multiple players over 60% participation, just very active in all the hands.
And something else we haven't mentioned is, yeah, there are people that will demote down in most of the divisions, and there will be people that you're surprised by. I mean, one that jumps out at me on this list is Pio. Not someone I would have expected to drop to B2, but pulled it together, got one of those guaranteed promotion slots, is heading back to B1, and hopefully a little bit further than that.
Absolutely. The ARML can be cutthroat at times. You never know who's going to make it, who's going to promote, who's going to demote. And over the course of a long period of time, though, things, of course, should balance out. And you might end up where you expect to be.
Well, over the long term, you should, or at least plus or minus one division.
Right.
But again, it's a long time. Mahjong is just inherently a bit of an unstable game. Sometimes you'll have great luck, sometimes you'll have bad luck. It's a combination of, when I win, am I winning big? And then when I lose, can I at least limit some of my losses? I think we'll end up talking a lot more about that as we get to some of the other divisions.
Absolutely.
So let's take a look at B1.
Or perhaps the B2 standings
Oh,
for the
yeah,
season.
actually, let's
There we go.
There we go. Actual names might be useful. And of course, you're going to see some of these names, of course, were there last season. Some of them were promotions from B3 last season. And any names just jump out at you?
Yeah, with the great number of promotions from last season out of B2, that means a lot of people promoted out of B3 into B2 for this season. And so Jeff Tran, a player who I've known for a long time in the Mahjong community, not personally, but have seen games and played against in tournaments. Of course, Blaine Singletary was in B2 last season, will be battling out again this season, a fellow commentary member, and will be hoping to promote into B1 in the next season. And just so many of these new players. Jonathan S., who actually is not a new player, but worked as a substitute, served as a substitute in a previous season and is starting the promotion train here. Kevin D., who is actually a clubmate of mine. We play in the same Mahjong club and managed to promote out of B3 and will hopefully continue the climb as well. So yeah, a lot of new names. Looking forward to seeing the grind here in B2. I imagine it'll be just as exciting as the last season.
Yeah, it's always a big fight. You're sitting here, you're B2, you're like, well, I feel like I can do better. Well, this is your chance to prove it. Well, let's take a look at B1. And just as I said last time, names you didn't expect to demote last season that dropped. Claire is the one that jumps out at me, ends up putting up a solid score here. But really, the story of B1 was Michael and Alec just rolling. Similarly to some of their divisions, you get a couple of people that just pull away from the pack, and then everyone else is in that mad scrum, just trying to survive. And you get a couple extra promotions, end up with 11 total, and of course a few demotions there. But again, the standard stat you normally look at, your winning percentage is very high. I mean, other than Haru, really anyone here who's highlighted in red is going up, and even Haru there at the 23.3 is just barely missed the cut. Fairly low deal in, and those that are dealing in are dealing in fairly cheaply. Like not, you have some of the you also have some of the most aggressive players in all of ARML. You said they were in B2. I'd say they were in B1 last season.
That
There are a few
true.
people I just jump out and say they're people that could either end up demoting quite a while, or they could end up winning the league, like winning A1 and cruising to it.
I imagine you're looking at the names, perhaps the two next to each other, Rachel and Ada, who
Those would
are.
definitely be two of them. I'd put Sarah in there as
Mhm.
well. Uh, Claire, to a lesser extent, a little more on the defensive side, which kind of bitter at times, but ended up third overall. And let's see, Andres similarly can just wild swings. Really, a lot of those New York players at Richinomi have that issue. Of course, we've had Huang had won 2 seasons ago, and we'll get to that in A1 later, but just rolled over people that had been probably playing a lot longer, especially online, and just took complete control of that final table. When you look here at B1, you just see big winning percentage. Ada at that 31.4 winning percentage. That is absolutely absurd.
There is, it's going to be hard to beat that even in the rest of the divisions. Of course, the names aren't the promotion names are not just big winners. We see some more defensive play from players like Tucker and Alex, who are a lot more well known for their defensive prowess, and we can see their win percentage is 20.6 for Alex, 18.9, much lower, but they played very consistently and were pretty comfortably in position to promote throughout the league. And one more note, once again in this division, the promotion arrows extend even past what we can see. Hadu and Philip did end up promoting out of B1 this season, will be fighting in A2. So congratulations to both of those players. The players who ended up positive did end up advancing due to players going on hiatus.
And just for overall league stats, I think the obvious thing that jumps out is a 24% winning percentage on average. You had
To
Aaron, who was kind of low, had just a really rough season, and just couldn't get hands. He didn't have really bad deal ends, but just couldn't win hands. That'll be a recurring theme for a few of the people that demoted. But just overall, people winning so much. And it's not like they're dealing in that much either. Basically, right on line with the league average in terms of feeds. They're just winning hand after hand after hand. When you get on those runs, you get those big scores, you get those flashy wins. Like, they add up.
Yeah, I don't think we have any clips from B1 for this particular broadcast, but there are some crazy hands that you can check out our previous broadcasts on our YouTube page and just witness some of the wild hands that happened in the
I think
B1
we had
division.
a couple in the mid-season show where we went over it. B1 was just huge hands, and you can see that just taking control of the game. And when you want to really run up the score, you want to secure your spot, that's how you do it.
Yeah, and some of the players were really pushing things to the limit in the last session. I think Ada was one of the players who was kind of in the demotion zone, and just in that last session, poor Hanchan just skyrocketed up the list and managed to make it all the way up to ninth place in a guaranteed promotion slot. And I know Claire and Peter as well fought in that last session, and they were kind of on the bubble, but managed to climb their way into the third and fourth spot overall.
All right. I think we're going to have some names for the next B1 season. Again, these should virtually all be people you recognize once it loads. There we go. And I mean, it's going to be crazy. There are a bunch of promotions from B2 because you get an expanded division. One of the big things that was an issue during this last season was getting people scheduled, and particularly doing matchups, because if you don't know how many people are going to go on a hiatus, it could be very difficult to match up 17 people. So we had some of those overflows with 5 groups. We want to avoid that if at all possible. So what ended up happening is the bottom of ARML is effectively capped at 36 or 40, and every other division was expanded to 20 to simply make it easier. Because
Of
obviously you
course.
don't want to really face off against the same person twice, but you also don't want to have to throw one person into 5-player matches every week, which happened to 2 people last season.
Right. Yeah, just unfortunate due to the late nature of a schedule change. But yeah, it looks very clean this season. All groups of 4. And yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen in B1 this season. Sometimes you can make predictions about who's going to promote, who's going to stay in the division, but it just looks wild. Everyone has the potential to make it out.
I'd say kind of the same thing. The one name that will always jump out at me when I see it is Mike Mccloud.
Mm.
That is someone who's been in the Mahjong scene for a long time, very solid player, and I would expect him to get out. As for the rest, I mean, anyone could go up, anyone could go down, and there's no guarantee that even Michael, who's my personal pick for this division, will even promote because again, it's just 24 games.
That's right. Anything could happen. I believe Michael was on hiatus for the last season, so did not play and have the chance to promote then. But coming back into the division this time will make the push for it. Patrick Palmer stands out to me as a player who's participated in the IORMC last year, and I always have a little bit of a bias towards those names. I always recognize them whenever I see them. Of course, Edwin
Speaking
stands
of
out as well.
bias, yeah, we'll always be cheering for Edwin. We'll openly admit to being homers there a bit.
Yeah, a few
But
more names here that
Sarah has a very good chance of getting up there. All sorts of names on this list. Matthias
absolutely.
just put a monster season in the last season. You get up there again. Pio similarly. We know he's been around, can really put those tournament results in. Travis, pretty solid player long term. Like you could name anyone on this list, and I think they'd have a chance of getting up.
Joe with the wild hands, Anya with the aggressive play. Yeah, so many interesting names here.
All right, well, let's take a look at A2 then. So, I mean, I think the quick summary here is obvious, and that is what the heck are those average scores for especially Zilong and Kevin?
Yeah, those are absolute ridiculous. For Zilong, I think you look to the Ricci percentage for your answer. Very high, 28% Ricci percentage, and a low call rate as well, only 18%. So it would seem he likes to build a slower and larger hands to declare Ricci, and I think that has something to do with the average score being so high. For Kevin,
Yeah, but
though, I've got nothing. I have no idea.
just overall for the division, the average win is over 200 points higher than the rest of the league. So they're building big hands.
Mm.
And just generally, that's something I've seen is as you get further up in the divisions, you get people who are building bigger and better hands. And sometimes they'll go off and sometimes they won't. And then you hit A1, and there's a bit of a fight because everyone knows how to build them, and so they will try and shut you down. And it ends up looking a bit messier at times. But you see the potential here in A2, and they're just building hands, fundamentals all the way. We see Crow here, of course, was dominating this division almost the whole way into the last couple sessions, was really never in any danger of falling out of the top 7. Daniel and Zilong and Kevin then pulled way out. Anthony had a couple good sessions there. Aaron had a nice run there at the end, and just really solid play from a lot of them. It was a bit unfortunate for Lucas, was right there on the precipice, but had a couple bad rounds at the very end and ends up at that minus 20 and will have another chance to prove it in A2. Of course, Lucas was one of the 2 unfortunate players from the previous season who were a victim of that absolutely cutthroat plus zero point 0.9 was the demotion cutoff in A1. So
Absolutely.
Lucas, Dustin, Kaz, and June had all dropped to A2, and especially for Dustin and Lucas, it was just rough.
Yeah, I believe it was Kevin in third place who had a late Yakuman to start shooting up the list and really solidify that promotion. And then I thought it was very interesting this season. Anthony in fourth place here with 14 second places, which is, I believe, the most in the RML out of any of the divisions. 14 had an equal number of firsts as he did thirds and fourths.
When you can get 19 out of your 24 games in the top two, you expect to promote.
Yeah, and certainly no surprise to see Anthony in the promotion zone. And there's an interesting situation at the end with the demotions.
Yeah, Dustin and Sichuan actually ended up in a tie. So you see the minus 106.6, but Dustin, I believe, got the second tiebreaker because the first was average placement, where they tied, and the second placement was number of firsts plus number of seconds. And Dustin just barely managed to eke it out. It does not get any closer than that.
Of course, I think there was an interesting battle at the end between June and Lucas among the group of four in the session 6 were trying to make it out of the zone or make it out of the demotion zone or promote into the promotion zone. We have a clip from that game. There's only 2 8-mon left. So there's a we see.
Oh, Sumo Giri.
Not even Kadagiri. That's interesting. That's the second time June has done that now. The one turn wait and
it comes out. And that's the expensive side. That's the Takame, Richi, Apatsu, Sanshoku, Dora. No Ura, but still a Hanuman for June. Like you said, Hanuman are bust, and that's massive.
There's only 2 8-mon left.
Yeah, and that ended up being a huge hand. You got June out of the demotion range and ended up taking Lucas's chance of getting back into A1 and basically killed it. And you take that type of deal in. I can't blame Lucas at all here going for the Sanshoku. You have the locked in 2-3-4, but ends up dealing in on the Apatsu. And the Sumigarichi does work. Of course, Karagirichi would have worked as well. But regardless, see 12,000. It's a monster swing in this game. At this point, Crow is obviously very clearly safe. And Triss was making a play to try and climb a bit, but Lucas needed that one and unfortunately couldn't pull it together. But great player by Jin.
Dueling Sanshoku, sometimes one of them's got to win, and so a bit of a coin flip loss for Lucas. But what a win for June, and that actually confirmed safety. June managed to avoid the demotion zone by winning that hand.
Here we have the new upcoming A2 league. You're going to see a bunch of combinations, but two names that will jump out at you as kind of, wait, what? Are Eric and Huang. And we'll get into that in a bit. But two of our season champions will be in A2. So it will have the most ARML champions in A2. So expect it to be a complete dogfight.
Absolutely. I do not envy the players who just promoted into A2 only to have to face some A1 players.
And you just look at almost all the names on this list. You go, oh yeah, I really don't want to face that person. And just immediately I see Lucas, Claire, Ada, Aldwin, Dustin, the two mentioned earlier of Eric and Huang, Tucker, Philip, just all over. Rachel. Everything on this list is just scary. And for this not to be A2, I think the talent pool in the US is deeper than a lot of people may have suspected.
Yes. Yeah,
but
and that's a really
nice. Is very much anyone could win. Anyone could go up. Anyone could go down. This is kind of scary.
A2 completely brutal this season. I wish everyone in this division the best of luck, and we will, of course, be attempting to broadcast as many of these games as we can, because I am 100% certain there are going to be some thrilling ones.
All right, well, let's head to A1. So, of course, as we mentioned, the first things to jump out are the two previous champions of RML ended up going down. Kenyon did manage to pull it out in the very end. There was a very dramatic hand for the confirmation of the championship. You had four players who were just hoping to get their hands, and Kenyon just needed Tempai, and the other players needed Yakuman. If Kenyon hadn't ended Tempai, then Amy would have ended up being the champion. But I think the biggest story is still just the demotions at this point. And they're basically two different stories. So Eric just couldn't get the hands to come together, just couldn't draw anything. And you see that 15.1 winning percentage. And I looked at his hands. There were so many where I go, you just can't do anything with it. I guess there were some places, especially that 11% deal in, that maybe could have fought a little bit harder, but those are just bad hands so much over and over and over. Huang, on the other hand, was very different. So Huang actually had a very interesting situation. In RML, you do get penalized 30 points a game if you don't show up to scheduled games, and took a couple of those early in the season, and then kind of got behind the eight ball and tried to be a little more aggressive than probably should have been. And you see that with that 20.8% deal in rate. Still won a decent amount of hands, but just was always behind that from that penalty in the early rounds, and just struggled and finally got some big hands in that last session. By that point, is basically too late. There was another gigantic scrum on the demotion end. You had even me getting pulled into it. Going into that last session, I was at, I think, around +5, somewhere around there. And I ended up taking 2 force, and then I was in it. You had Jeremy was at my table and managed to win 3 games out of 4 in order to save himself. And you, Nathaniel, and Eric had a pretty monumental fight to survive as well.
Yeah, at that last table, it was pretty much a two-person battle between me and Eric to see who would promote and who would demote. And I can't say that I had some amazing hands, but Eric just had worse hands. And I think we finished in the final 2 games 3rd and 4th, where I was getting 3rd and he was getting 4th. But the important thing was that I managed to be one placement ahead, and so that's what allowed me to survive. However, it was a really thrilling battle, and I believe that was the last broadcast, actually, of the ARML. And the same day, the battle for the championship was going on between Kenyon, Steve, Luce, and I believe Beechan.
Yeah.
And that was just a tremendous fight. If you missed it, if anybody missed it, go ahead and look at the archived videos. That is an insane battle, and it was so fun to watch, so dramatic, so tense. At some point, everyone had a chance to pull ahead throughout the day, so it was quite thrilling, and Kenyon managed to pull out on top in the end. And there was a chance that none of those players would advance, that Amy would be the champion as well.
Right. If Kenyon hadn't gotten Tempai in the last 2 hands, then Amy would have done it, because Kenyon wouldn't have had enough points to overtake. Ended up with a small second, which you see that big split of 4.5. Well, there's a big difference between second at 29,000 and second at 31,000 due to the way the RML calculates plus minus. So Kenyon did manage to pull out dramatic table, as Nathaniel said. Go, if you haven't seen it, go watch that VOD. It was a truly amazing table. You could see a whole bunch of fighting and scrambling, and then you have everyone except Kenyon basically going for the big hands, going for the comebacks, and fascinating game overall.
Yeah, very situational play, and I think we have a clip of the final situation in that game.
Yeah, there's no way for
And that
Kenyon
is
to take some
it.
time next round. That's going to be
And
it.
in 3 more discards, 2 more.
What? Thinking about calling Chi here? Just for funsies? Pong!
Oh, okay, I can see that.
Let's do it! If a 3-so comes out, you auto-con. It's already gone.
I'm counting that for they're Pawn and Tempai across the way. Vishen does manage to get Tempai. Will be one of 2 Tempai, as Steve has managed Chitoy here.
Well, Steve could deny Tempai. Also for no reason. Yeah,
Okay, for no reason, does. And officially, Steve wins the game with plus 20.8, but the big story is Kenyon with plus 9. That is enough to jump Amy for the summer championship. Huge congratulations to Kenyon. And you just see that one person going Kokushi, another going for the Suwanko, another just content to take Tempai and hope to get something in the next hand. People just building for their win condition. And at that point, all Kenyon needed to do was fold out, and good enough to win ARML and was the summer champion.
Yeah, huge congratulations to Kenyon for pulling it out this season. It is always such a difficult challenge to make it. Kenyon joins Erica and Huang as the season champions. We'll have one more battle this season in A1 to determine who will be who will fill the final seat at the end of year championship.
And can we go back to the stats page for A1?
Yeah, there were some interesting ones.
Yeah, so similarly, the one that jumps out at me, so there are 2 things that just look obvious when you just look at the top lines, what's going on. And the first is they're building hands. They're just not winning as many of them, mainly because no one's dealing into them. You have a 200 plus separation in average hand value in A1 from the rest of the league, and 1.5% lower deal-in rate. And you see so many of those at 9, 8, 10, 11% deal-ins. You get towards the top. And there are a couple outliers, but really everyone is sitting sub 15 other than a few. Just people aren't dealing in all that often. You see all sorts of different play styles. The participation rates vary from 40% to 65.
But there's some consistent stats as well. We can see in the upper half of the division, those are where all the red scores are for the win percentage. Higher win percentage will generally lead you to more winning games. And of course, the deal-in percentages are also red there, meaning they are on the lower end. So win hands don't deal in. That is the name of the game. And the one that stands out to me the most, though, is for Kenyon, played, a pretty standard game. 22% average win is not that much higher than the rest of the field. In fact, it's lower than some of the names like Amy, Steve, and Luce. The average win is just under 5,000, which again, it doesn't stand out compared to the 6,000 that Vincent had or the 5,700 that Beechin and Simon had or Minko score. The deal-in percentage of 11.3%, not, it's low, but it's, in the middle of the ranges. It's not the lowest. It's that average deal-in score of 3,000, so much lower than every other player at the table. Kenyon knows which hands are worth fighting for and which hands you can afford to deal into because they're not worth enough to care about. And that is really what pulled her ahead in the end.
Well, it was certainly a big advantage being that last dealer in the last game. But yeah, that 3,074 deal in average. You see Vincent, who's just under 4K, and everyone else is sitting there around 44, 4,800, just dealing in fairly fairly expensively, even though just not that often compared to some of the other divisions. And the EV stat, as we always say, it's not a guaranteed track, but it should track pretty well of how their season's going, and that's what you see is all those 800s, 750s, 900s are just sitting there at plus 71 or higher. And so, of course, the previous season in the spring, there was an absolute dogfight, as I referred to earlier in this review session that the cutoff was plus minus 0.9. Well, it was a lot more forgiving this season. You ended up a lot more of a standard split, but you still have, when you look at this, you wonder, wait, why isn't there anyone anywhere near plus minus zero? I ended up being the closest at minus 25, but normally you expect kind of a normal distribution, a bell curve, where you have a bunch of people around zero, maybe some to get towards 100, 150 on the plus and minus. But no, here you just had this dogfight of everyone from really Bishan up. Simon was a little bit down for, got a really strong last session. Really, Emre Bishan and up were competing for that title. Minko actually started the last session, I believe, at the top of A1 and just got, just some really bad hands and a couple deal ends there and took a huge hit to drop all the way down. But when you have all those people within 25 points of the lead, you have 4 people there. And again, really anyone was within range, that it was a fierce fight for the title.
Yeah, I'm curious about a stat, Korak. I know anybody who knows Korak knows he's a huge proponent of the Ricci. So I have to ask, why is your Ricci rate the lowest in A1? If you look at the 10th place, Arthur M has a 16.5% Ricci rate, which is the lowest. So how did that end up happening?
It is. So if you know how I play and know how I think, I will try to be involved in as many hands as possible. If I can get the draws to finish the hands, I will almost always throw the stick in. But sometimes you just get nothing over and over and over. And so I was like, okay, we have to take the dumb 1,000-point hands. Let's just call and go. You see me ending up with the highest call rate. So it's not that I didn't reach you so much as that I was forced to call. And you see my participation rate is second overall in the league, again, with the highest call rate. And so I'd love to reach you, but the tiles didn't give me a chance. And honestly, when I look back at some of those games, because you see, I ended up with 9 lasts. I go, how did that happen? And then I went back into the logs and say, oh my God, that was a minus 30 fourth. If I had played that kind of in a normal, more aggressive style, those would have been minus 70s or minus 80s. Or I managed to claw back a couple Mongons because I picked a couple good weights, that type of thing. And they just slowly add up. And it's about mitigating those bad tiles, bad draws. But speaking of tiles and draws, the one statistic that isn't shown here is Amy, who is in the second overall and had a chance of winning the league as well, had an average Uradora rate of 1. For context, the average for ARML is around 0.42. So you get 42 times out of 100 you hit an aura. Amy was averaging 1 on every Ricci 1.
That is absolutely insane. It feels like a special power that if you just throw the stick in, you win the hand. You're automatically guaranteed an extra Han.
It was, well, obviously you don't do it just by hitting it every time. It's that you're hitting 2 or 3 or 4
Right.
or even 6 if there are some cons in there. But no, just had an absolutely amazing run with those Ricci's. And I'd love to be able to keep my Ricci rate up towards that 20%, which is what I'm normally at. But I ended up at 16.5 because the tiles weren't coming, the hands weren't fixing. And if the rest of the table is moving fast, I had to keep up.
But you found a way to play around despite the draws. You're still finding a way to stay involved in the hands and make something happen, which I think is an important lesson for everyone. I think most of the players in A1 are actually really strong at that skill. You know, you can't control what tiles you get. You can't control your high pie, but what you can control is what you do with them in your evaluation about whether it's a hand that you can build into something, even if it means lowering the value. Lowering the value of your hand can, and making sure you win prevents other players from winning their monster hands. And so,
well, there's a saying out there: a Tanya will end it all. Well, regardless, a 1,000-point hand that you win is worth a lot more than that Yakuman you didn't finish.
right.
And it can hurt to look at it and go, I had so much here, but I have to just take it. You have to be willing to accept the discipline, take the hit. And again, you look at my stats, I ended up with 9 last places. And when you look at my overall stats, they don't look that good, but it's about mitigating the damage if you're not getting what you think you should be getting.
Absolutely.
And as we say over and over, it's about taking advantage of when you have the position, when you have the tiles, the flow, whatever you want to call it, and really running up that score. And then on the other end, mitigating your losses if you're just drawing nothing. If you're, oh, great, another 4 Shunten hand on turn 4. This is going nowhere. Well, the question is A, do you deal in? B, do you force it? C, do you just kind of see who's the cheap hand and try and feed them something? All these are things you should be thinking about during your game, adjusting your play, and just trying to, again, mitigate your losses if you're just not getting what you want.
Well, certainly this upcoming season is going to be really interesting. Of course, only one league champion currently resides in A1. So who's your prediction for the A1 league champion once we get that to come up?
Yeah, look for us. Okay, there we have A1. Well, I'm always a proponent of you're the league champion until you're not. So I think the standard prediction would be Kenyon. I think when you look at people who have consistently delivered solid results in RML, another good name to look out for would be Steve, was really competing there at the top level the whole time. Of course, Bishan can always be a wild card. Speaking of wild cards, Amy again. Crow is always someone to be aware of. Max could definitely pull it out. Really, anyone in this list has a good chance of just sneaking in. Aaron is someone who had a couple people on this list in A1 who had really rough inaugural beta league season. It dropped all the way to B1, specifically Crow and Aaron. They've both been involved in the Mahjong scene for a long time, and they grounded out. They dominated their divisions in B1. They got out in the A2 division, and they made it to the top flight, and we'll see how they go.
And of course, really anyone in this division could be a winner. All the players in A1 are very strong, and it, of course, depends on just how the games play out. Anything can really happen in 6 sessions, 4 Hanchan each. So, of course, I can't wait for the season to start. It already has technically started. In fact, I believe there is a game that is scheduled tonight. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting this winter season or fall season underway.
Yeah, so I'll call a few here that look particularly interesting. That session 4 match with Anthony, Steve, Kenyon, and Amy should be something to watch.
Yes, Anthony, who had so many second places that last season in A2, very consistent player. Steve and Kenyon, who were right up at the top fighting for the league championship last season, and then Amy, who was there as well, was sitting and watching, hoping that somehow she would be able to win it. Yeah, a very tense table there. And of course, I always look to the session that doesn't have names in it, to that 6th session, where we can see the sort of snaked standings. We won't actually know who will be playing who until the 5th session is complete, because it is your position that determines who you'll be playing in that final session. And that 6th session is just always so crazy. It's your last chance to make a play at the championship or at your promotion slot or to avoid demotion. And it changes the way you play, especially based off of the information you know about how the other tables are doing. And so I'm always so thrilled when it comes to be 5th session, 6th session time. Everyone is playing to their goals. And to that point, it's very important to know what your win conditions are when you play in those sessions. It always makes it so intense.
Yeah, it is always an advantage to go last, but the most important thing is the games get played. I look at my own games, and the one that jumps out at me is that session 5 with Zalong, Max, and Simon. Of course, anytime I'm stuck with Max, we kind of bash heads.
I know you Max has that play style that might clash a bit. It causes the rest of the table to speed up.
Yeah, Mac's a very aggressive player, can really take control of the table and force everyone to adjust. And my experience with Max has always been if it's just him, I can isolate him and just kind of maneuver around it. But the question is, how would Simon and Zalong be able to do it? Because if one other person jumps in, then I have to play catch up against two players, and it's much more difficult.
I'll be honest, when I saw the schedule come out and I saw my name and all the matchups, there wasn't a single one that I felt comfortable with. I'm just scared of everybody here. Every single table is going to be terrifying. The matchup that I'm probably most excited for is in week 3 when I get to play against Anthony, Shu, and Simon. Anthony's a player who I butted head against a lot in IORMC tournaments. And so I'm looking forward. I think we got to play as well in the inaugural beta leagues, but it's been a while since we've been able to match up against each other. So I'm looking forward to that one. And yeah, just so many scary tables, especially as we get to the really important weeks, week 4, week 5. Playing in week 4 against Luce and Max and Minko, who I've played against a lot at this point, and Kenyon and Crow and Aaron in week 5, just absolutely terrifying matchups. So I'm sure they'll be really fun, though. I'm really looking forward to it.
Ju was on a hiatus last season and will be back. We have Kaz, of course, who managed to promote out of A2 after having been demoted last season. And there's one other thing I'd like to say, and that is when I look at the final results here and I think about, okay, so who's been in A1 from the start? This is something I mentioned in the championship broadcast, but the names would be Kenyon, Max, Steve, Bishan, Simon, me, and Jeremy. And if you told me all those names had been in A1 from the start, I don't think I've been surprised by any of them except maybe Jeremy, but Jeremy's been studied really hard, so not really that surprised by that either. But all the rest of those have been involved in the scene for what, 5, 10 years minimum. So you're talking people who've been out there, seen so much. You're veterans out there. Question is, how will the up and comers do? And you'll note that Kenyon, of course, won last season, but anyone on this list could pull out the championship in A1.
It'll just be a matter of time before we get to see who wins it. Matter of 12 weeks, starting this week.
Starting this week, as you mentioned, we officially kick off the league today. So there will be some games. We won't be casting anything today because we're already getting a little tired here, but keep an eye on the calendar. We'll definitely announce everything in Discord. We try to get things out to Twitter. And of course, this is when we do the obligatory plugs and such. Follow us on Twitter and at American Reachy. We have the website, AmericanReachy.org. You can sign up. You would be going into the winter season at this point. And the YouTube link is tinyurl.com/ARMLYT. And any closing thoughts, Nathaniel?
Well, now that we have the YouTube page up there, I just want to say once again, if you missed it, check out the season final broadcast for the summer season. It should be up on the YouTube page now. And again, that was an absolutely thrilling finish and definitely one that should be watched.
Yeah, it was an amazing day because we just cast for that day. It wasn't just the championship. We had the demotion matches first, the big struggle between you and Eric, and then the championship table where all 4 of the players had a chance, especially this really intense fight between Luce and Kenyon that Kenyon ultimately prevailed on. It's definitely worth a watch. So I think that's about all. And so this is Korak for the American Reach Mahjong League, wishing you a good evening, morning, night, or wherever you are. Take care, everyone.